Morning isolators, how are we doing? Well? Healthy? I hope so, and I do mean that. I really do hope that you're all staying safe, staying indoors, staying isolated and staying healthy and fit. That's the main thing, isn't it? But anyway, before we start this week, I'd just like to say a couple of words about how this thing is all going. It's amazing. It's absolutely incredible. I'm getting inundated with messages, comments, the likes and shares, but written comments where people have taken time out to email me or the various forms of messenger, just to say how much they're enjoying it and how much it's keeping them sane, and to thank me for doing it. But I think it's quite important for me to point out that you're all thanking me for doing this as a sort of a service, but really I should be thanking you, because you are keeping me in one piece with all of this. Every comment I get, every mail, everything, I read every single word. If I don't respond to them, it's because I have had thousands. I respond to some and just thumbs up to others or whatever, and it's not being flippant or whatever. There's a lot to get through, but don't stop, because I love it. In fact, I'll show you if it wasn't for the feedback, what I'm getting, what I'm seeing. It's just this. That's basically my view. A plastic box on a tripod, a couple of spotlights, and an empty attic. Well, I say empty, there's about 10,000 flies down there. And if it wasn't for the feedback that you lot are giving me, then that's all I've had to share me time with. But you're coming in your droves, and like I say, it's well appreciated, and it makes me feel sort of proud in a way to be part of this community that we've got, and we have got a massive community of carp anglers and just general fishermen and people, all through social media and YouTube and whatever. We all sort of support each other. I know we have our little fallouts, we have our little bickers over, bait and rigs and who's caught what and who should be fishing here and who shouldn't be fishing there and what counts and what doesn't and all of that. But that's all superficial, isn't it? When you get something like this fucking science fiction that we're living in at the moment, I think we rely on each other a lot more, and I think that's a good thing. And that was really brought home to me, the size of it all. This morning I got an email. I was checking my emails, and I got this email. Now this email comes from New Zealand. Okay. Now, contrary to popular belief, Australia isn't the other side of the world to us. New Zealand is. So this has come as far away from here, from my little attic, as you can possibly get and still be on our little blue planet. And I saw it pop up amongst loads of other emails, and I saw the name at the top, and I thought, surely not. Opened it up, and it was from Paul Gummer. Now, if you cast your mind back a couple of episodes, when I talk about Harefield and catching my second 30 from there, and having seen it in Hutch's book and read the story of this guy, Paul Gummer, overcoming all the obstacles there with the bars and the 60-foot leader and swimming out after the fish. That's the guy. I don't know him, I only know him from Hutch's book. I've mentioned him loads of times over the past, when I've retold that story of the Harefield fish, and how we looked up at Hutchie and Paul Gummer and the others as icons at the time. When you're reading, there's only a couple of books out back then. And you're reading all about him, and now he's emailed me from New Zealand, and he's just watched one of these. Now he starts off the mail by humbling himself, really. As I said, I'm putting him up there on a pedestal when you're reading the books and what have you. And one of the second line on the mail is saying, I was just the same as you guys, struggling to overcome how to land fish from such a dangerous, sharp, gravel and mussel infested environment as Harefield. And it's quite a long mail, and he goes on about some of his experiences on there, with the same as we had on other lakes, inflatable kids boats and swimming out there and learning the bars and what have you. But a little fact that I never knew right at the end He says that just before he emigrated the other side of the world, he said he went to Australia first and now he's in New Zealand. His last fish, which I assume from the UK, was from Harefield, and it was the orange one, which was my first ever 30. And strangely enough, he caught it from the same swim. The lake was a bit smaller then, it was about 40 acres before they dug the back out. But where the point was, where I caught the orange one from, there was a little mound of gravel that only showed when the water was right down. And it's still known, as it was when I was there, as Gummer's Hump, named after him. And he said he had it from this, he used to call it the small island. It was probably a little bit bigger when he was there. Like I said, the water levels changed an awful lot. When I fished there, you could only fish there when the water dropped down, and it's tiny. I've got a photo somewhere, I'll ping it up, probably up by now, of me. You can see me out there with my little brolly, 45-inch brolly was all that would fit on there. And the rods went down in front, and you've got that island. Again, I've got a photo of that, will come up. You've got an island out there to the left, which is right out in the middle of the lake, and he talks about how you could, from this particular little hump, you could get out to the back of this island on the back of the gravel bar there. And like I say, the last fish he caught, he had a couple of 20s on his last session there, and then he had to swim out, go over the bar for his last fish, and it was 32 pounds 6 ounces. And that was the orange one. And it's great, you know. Amazing reading that. I'll mail him back in a bit. And it just made me, as I say, realise that it's not just a small community, it's actually a global community that we're all part of. And thank God for that, because, you know, I think we need each other at the moment. But anyway, enough of that, and on to the main event. As I said last week, Pit 4, we're back at Pit 4. We had given up our tickets, we'd gone down there, we bumped into Mark in the pub, we'd gone and walked around the lake, we'd seen some better fish, quite a few better fish. 23 was the biggest we'd had prior to that, but we'd seen mid-upper 20s in there. We got our tickets, and we were straight back down there. This was probably the middle of July, something like that by then. And Pit 4 is beautiful in the summer. We'd only fished it in the winter before, but in the summer, oh, it's gorgeous. It is such a picturesque little lake. You know, all these beautiful little paths round overgrown swims that have been sculpted and made lovely in the past, but then they've sort of matured with time. You know, the trees have fallen in a little, or just hung in a little bit. Everything was ivy clad. It really was a beautiful lake. And you had the main canal bank that separated Pit 4 from Save, the canal in between, and then round the other side you had the point. Now the point was an area that I really liked. There was a point and there was the back bay, I think it was called, that had a swim called the Builders, or Builders Yard in it, and another little one called the Reeds that hardly ever got fished. But the Builders hardly got fished as well. That back bay pretty much got left alone apart from the back of the point. So the point was a major area. You had two swims on the front. First one was the pads, and the second one was just called the point, and like I say, the one behind was called the back point. Now, the pads grew on a bar, absolutely savage bar that came out, I suppose it was 50, 60 yards, something like that. Well, it wasn't overly far. Maybe not even that, maybe 45 yards. And it came slightly further away from the point as it came round in front of the point swim, and then to the left of the point swim it dropped away into a big deep area of water that went across towards the car park on the far side and the oaks on the end bank. They liked that area in the winter, but in the summer they'd come out of that deep and they'd come up on the bars, and you'd see them cruising along, and then they'd just disappear under these pads, and that's where they'd stay throughout the day when it was sunny. You just see the pads sort of tilting and rocking, you know, as one fish would brush into another one and they'd sort of move about in there. There were some huge trees on the swims on that side, huge trees. And you could get right up them, and in the right light you could look down into the pads and you could actually see these big old black submarines coming out the pads and sort of circling around the top of the bar. It was quite shallow right on the top, right against the pads. And then, you know, having a little mushty about. Occasionally going down, maybe a few bubbles coming up, and then you see them rise back up and go back under their little canopy of pads and sit under there for most of the day, really. It was a very, very good area. It was quite a popular area as well. And on the far side of that first bay, there was another swim called the southwesterly, because that's where the southwesterly winds blew, and also the bars seemed to snake round into there, so it was like a natural funnel. If the fish followed on from the pads and the further bars, they'd end up in this southwesterly. So this first bay was basically a very, very good area. The back bay where the builders was, they'd get in there when they got agitated. You know, if a couple had been caught or had been clumped or had been cast out a lot, quite often they'd come out of that bay, go down the centre and go around the back into this little bay. And I used to keep my eye on there a lot. I really did like it around there. In fact, I remember this builder's yard. I was fishing in there one day. I'd gone down straight from work. I think I was on one of the London sites. And I'd gone straight down there, and I had a big bucket full of tigers. We used to use tigers in quantity back then. I thought at the time I was the first one using tigers on there. In fact, I wrote in the book that I'd been pre-baiting with tigers, and Mark Wilcox, who was fishing up there, had caught a fish, and it had passed a load of tigers, like shit them on the mat basically, and that had given him the idea to use tigers. I've since found out that he was also using tigers. In fact, he'd used them before we even started there. In fact, I had him on the phone yesterday. We were discussing this. I've got a few photos off of him. So a few of these overlays are photos that I've nicked off of him. So we were both sort of using tigers, pretending we were using boilies and catching on tigers without telling each other. So it took a while for this to come out, which is the way it is, isn't it? You know, even when you fish together as a sort of a team, you all become mates and you swap information. You always hold a little bit back. You know, I mean, that's the whole deal, isn't it? If you've got a little edge, you're not going to tell everyone about it until you've milked it to death. But anyway, so I got round to the builder's yard, and it had a huge plateau in front of it, like a completely flat top plateau, really steep sides. I think on the top it was, well, I know how deep it was just about chest deep. Because what I used to do, pre-baiting and fishing when I was in that swim, was snap the lid shut on the bucket, which then made it into a float. I'd hold the bucket, I'd get in the lake and just kick my feet and get out to the plateau and keep feeling down, you know, you can't feel anything, and as soon as your feet touch the bottom, you knew you were on the plateau, and you'd sort of walk until you got to the shallowest piece of water, rip the top off the bucket, sprinkle them all round, you know, 5 kilos of them probably, snap the lid back on the empty bucket, cuddle it again, swim back to the bank. So I'd done this on this particular session. I was fishing 2 rods on there. I think it was only a 2-rod water, although I'm sure we probably used more than 2 on the odd occasion. Like I said, it was very lightly bailiffed, this lake. But you had 2 on show, let's put it that way. So I'm set up in there. It's a beautiful swim. Just had my little brolly there, and the actual bit you set up in wasn't very big, but it was very picturesque. 2 rods out the front, and I had 1 on each side of the plateau, probably a rod length apart. I'd swum this bucket out there, all fully baited, all perfect. And I remember I did the day and had nothing and saw nothing, and I thought, I could well be in the wrong area here. All through the night, nothing again, nothing happened at all. In the morning, I'd seen a bit of activity, you know, the odd sort of little bow wave and that, but nothing to write home about. And it got to that time, sort of mid-morning, when you've had a few fags and a couple of cups of coffee, and you just, you know, I need to be in the bushes a bit rapid. So I picked up my bucket and I've gone a few rod lengths back into the bushes, making sure no one can see me, done my business. Lid back on the bucket, came back into the swim, and both the rods, it had completely changed the swim. Both the rods were pulled out, one to the right and one to the left. It was about then I realised I hadn't turned the alarms on at all, the whole session. In the 2 minutes I'd been, or 5 minutes I'd been in the bushes, I'd had 2 takes, 1 on each rod. And they'd gone opposite directions, they'd gone round the back of the plateau. I'm pulling this one until it locked up, then I'm putting it down and I'm pulling this one until it locked up. The upshot was of it, I lost them both. I think they both cut me off on this savage gravel. I was absolutely gutted, you know. I'd been there, sat there for 24 hours or whatever it was, waiting for a bite over this mountain of tiger nuts, and the 5 minutes I'm off the rods, the rest of the time literally I'd been sat in the swim. There was nowhere else to go when you were around the builders. 5 minutes off the rod in the bushes, come back and I'd lost 2 fish. But unfortunately that was the way that Pitfall was. You know, that's how dangerous a lot of those pits in the valley were. It wasn't so much the gravel, it was the mussels. All the gravel bars got covered in pea mussels, zebra mussels, swan mussels. I don't know if you ever fish with mussels, but zebra mussels are the worst of the lot. They're not very big, they're sort of thumbnail size, but not even that, you know, fingernail size. Stripy, hence the zebra tag. But they sit straight up and they are razor sharp, absolutely razor sharp. This was back before we used braid and what have you. And like I said, when I was on Harefield, I started using the sort of 20 foot of 20 pound line as a leader. So I went back to that. I was fishing the point swim quite a lot at this time when I could get in there. The pads was always taken. If there was one angler on the lake, he'd be in the pad swim. The point swim wasn't as popular, but I preferred it. But I came up with this method. I put the 20 foot leaders on, and before I tied it to the main line, I'd put on a pike float, like a pilot float they used to call them. So if you imagine like a little pike bung, but drilled straight through the centre, and I'd slide that down onto the leader, and then I'd knot the leader. I think I used to put a little bead on there as well to make sure it didn't go over the knot, like a sliding bead. And I'd cast that out onto the bars as they left the pads and came round in front of the point. Just, you know, donk normal cast as if the float wasn't there, and then I used to let out loads of line until the float had come up either to the surface or just below the surface or whatever, and then I'd sort of half tighten the lines down, and I'd fish the tips right up in the air, big long banks, back bank sticks, and even longer front bank sticks. So it's up in the air like that, the line's going out, most of it's out of the water, just going in just in time to hit the pike float, and then semi-slack coming down off the pike float onto your rig, probably had a bit of lead core on the end to keep it all nice and tight, onto your spot. And the plan was, obviously, if you got a bite, you get out there as quickly as you can, hold the rod high, the line's already off the bar, so it hasn't had all night or whatever, or hours to dig in and get trapped by the mussels, because those zebra mussels, if they're open and your line falls in them, they shut. So, you know, you're on a hide into nothing before you even start. I remember the first time I actually used this setup in the point. Actually, if you dial back a few hours, I remember turning up for this session in the point swim. There's a bit of a story here. Again, I don't think this one's in the book because it does involve some measure of alcohol. On this session when I brought these pike floats down, I turned up, I got in the swim, I set up all the gear with a pike float and what have you, and there was a few lads over the car park bank. I think Mark was over there and Scott, a couple of others, whatever. And there was a guy next to me in the pads that they used to call Machine Gun. His name was Johnny Meacham, and they called him Machine Gun Meacham because the poor guy had a stutter. He was a bit older than all of us, fairly, you know, I don't know, maybe 20 years older than us, I can't remember. He seemed old at the time, he was probably, back then, he was probably younger than I am now, but, you know. So there's Machine Gun in the swim next door. He was a mate of the others. He was set up there, and I'd got all my gear, but I hadn't cast out. And they were all over there, and I could hear cans popping and what have you, and laughter and everything. And I thought, oh, before I chuck them out, I'm going to just pop round, sort of mid-afternoon or whatever. Take Fat Sam with me, sit there, have a couple of beers in the sun, and sort of chill out, and, you know, like you do, just socialise. So anyway, I've worked it round there, me and Fat Sam come round there. Rods are ready to cast out on the rests. Got round there, had a couple of beers. Like I said, in the car park, so I've got my van round there, probably had some spare beer in mine. Drunk theirs, drunk mine. The afternoons rolled on to the evening. I think a barbecue came out. A bit of food went on the barbie. Starting to get a bit dark. I'm still round there. I'm getting a bit pissed by now. We've had some food, we've had some more beer. We've had a right old crack round there. Anyway, eventually I thought, I better get back to my swim. I haven't even cast out yet. I wasn't even sure if I could make the do all the do with the marker floats and that in the dark and in the state I was in by now. Anyway, so off we've gone, me and Fat Sam, we've trotted around. So from the car park we've had to go between pit 4 and pit 3, past the oak swim, and then the path went away, sort of off of the lake, and then came back round the top of the southwesterly bay, behind a load of bushes, so you weren't actually right next to the lake as such. And then there was a gap in the sort of foliage, and there was this lovely little path. It was like a chip-ins sort of path that someone had made, and the sides of the path were scaffold boards on their edges with little wooden stakes, you know, to keep the chip-ins in and the stuff on the outside out. So this lovely little path, and it went down, it wound through the trees, and then it came into the pad swim where Machine Gun was, and then the path, so it opened out into his swim, and then the path carried on behind. It wasn't very far behind his swim, 10 yards or whatever, and then came into my swim. So it's one of those nights where there's no moon, there's a lot of cloud cover, it's pitch black. I mean, it's absolutely pitch black. Fat Sam had gone. She knew where she was going. She wanted to go to bed. She just shot off ahead. Usually I used to just follow her big flag bum, big waggy tail, anywhere I wanted to go in the dark, but she'd gone. So I've gone round now. I've gone sort of in what I think is the gap. I'm smashing and crashing about in the bushes. I'm getting a bit, I'm still like daytime dressed, shorts and t-shirt. I'm getting a bit torn up with brambles and that. I can't see that. I'm going in there and I'm not even finding the lake. And I'm thinking, I've done it wrong in here. So I've turned around and backtracked and managed to get back out onto the main bit. Tried again, second time. I've managed to find a bit of the path, but then I've ended up off the path. Didn't even make it to Machine Gunner's swim. And I thought, I could be here all night like this, trying to get back into my own swim. This is like becoming embarrassing. So I've gone back, found the original bit of the path with these little scaffold boards sticking up, and I thought, no one will see. So I've got down on my hands and knees, and I've crawled along, holding on to these. I thought, if I follow these scaffold boards, that's going to lead into Machine Gun swim. He'd be fast asleep, he won't know anything. And then I can just crawl through his swim, find the boards again, and end up in my swim. I mean, it all sounds a bit extreme, but it was very, very dark, and I was very, very drunk. So I've gone now, I've found the boards and I've put my plan into action. I'm on my hands and knees and I'm going through there like a commando, following these boards. And then the boards have stopped and it's opened up, and I thought, I'm in the pad swim, and I can see the lake now on the right hand side and his rods. And I'm not going to get up and walk and then try and find, I'll just carry on my hands and knees. So I'm scooting through his swim like that. And I've looked round and he's sat on the edge of his bed chair. I think he had a light and a book or whatever. And he's just like shaking his head and staring at me as if to say, what the bloody hell? He didn't say a word. And there's me on my hands and knees crawling through his swim. And I thought, I'm not even going to acknowledge him. I'm just going to keep going. And I kept going, and I made it back to the point swim. Somehow, I must have got my rods out. Because the next thing I remember, I had one of those army, I don't know if you remember them, they were mummy-style bags. So they were army issue. They used to zip up the front, right up to here, and they had a dear little hood, like a parka thing. They were stuffed full of feather, duck down and what have you, so they were actually feather stuffed. And they used to come out all the time, the feathers. You know, you'd wake up in the morning, you look like a chicken, half-plucked chicken, because they'd work their way out and they'd dig in your clothing. But they were renowned for the zips sticking. Absolutely renowned. They had these tiny little zips. I mean, how, you know, if you was out on a battlefield and you was tucked up in your sleeping bag in a muddy puddle or whatever it is soldiers do, and you had to jump up and shoot someone, you'd have no chance because you couldn't even get your arms out of the bloody things. Anyway, my next memory after the night before, it was like I heard a couple of beeps and then I had a screamer, and I looked and one of my high set up rods was bent right over it. It was absolutely rattling off, this rod. So I've jumped up, trying to get out of the bed chair. Next thing, I've just hit the deck face first. It was only my face that was out of the bag. It had caught right by my throat. Why I'd done it up so high, I don't know. My hands was inside. I was like a little Tyrannosaurus Rex trying to get out. And I'm wriggling along like a slug. And the rod's going like that, and I can see the spool going, and I'm thinking it's going to cut off any second. And I'm like thinking, what can I do? I could grab the rod with my teeth. That's about as close as I could get. And I struggled and struggled and struggled, and eventually I broke the zip open. And it bust open, and I come flying out the bag just as the tip of the rod went bing and came back, and I'd been cut off on my new float marker, float rig thing. And I remember the float come up, so I must have set it up in a way. Maybe I didn't have the bead. I set it up in a way that if I did lose a fish, I wouldn't lose the float. And I remember retrieving the float and resetting it up, putting them back out there. And actually, throughout that day, I had quite a result, to be honest. The method started working quite well. I wasn't getting cut off after that, as long as I wasn't trapped in a sleeping bag. And I think I had 2 fish later that day. I had a 23 pounder, which was as big as we'd caught up until then. And I had a beautiful mirror, absolutely corker mirror, of 26 pounds, I think it was. And that was significant. You know, it's only £3 bigger, but that was a significant step up, because that was more like the fish we'd seen, you know, earlier in the year in the Back Bay. And I started to think, oh, they are in here, these fish. And a couple of the other lads, a couple of the Essex lads had caught by then slightly better fish as well. I think one of them had upper 20, maybe even a scraper 30, which I wasn't there when he caught that. But Mark sent me a photo of quite a big fish. I'll ask him in a bit exactly how big it was, but he said that was probably one of the bigger 2 or 3 that was in there. And Rob Murphy, he caught an amazing fish, which I did see, and that was just over £30, 30 and a half, 30 and a quarter, something like that, and became known as Rob's 30, and also became the target, if you like. You know, probably the biggest known fish in the lake, or the biggest caught fish in the lake. But there was this other fish, I don't know if I mentioned it on the last episode, but there was a fish called grey scar, which was a bit of a mythical beast. I hadn't seen it, but some of the other lads said they'd definitely seen it, and it had a big grey scar on its back, and it was, you know, it was more of the stamp of the fish that had got out in the floods originally. It was sort of a mid-30, you know, big fish for that era, in the 80s, and for that area even. Yeah, so this fish had been seen, but I hadn't seen it. So that was probably, you know, it's always nice to have a big myth in a lake. But this fish that Rob had, Rob's 30, that really became the one that we all wanted, to be honest. So I mentioned briefly a couple of the other guys on there, Mark, Rob, but that little band, really, and Machine Gun. But there's probably about half a dozen in that little band, the Essex Boys, we used to call them, for obvious reasons. And they were a really nice bunch. We used to have a right laugh together. And characters, every one of them. A couple of them were a little bit odd. There's a guy called Lyndon. I remember Lyndon. I don't know what happened to Lyndon. He was quite entertaining. And he had another mate, a big lumpy mate, who was a bit of a giggle. But one of Mark's sort of closer mates, there was Rob, and there was another guy who we called Nutty, as you like. I don't even know his proper name. I know him really well. Met him a few times since those days as well. But I never did need to know his proper name. We used to give most people nicknames. But one of his favourite sayings was, if something happened, he'd go, "God, that was as nutty as you like." And he just became Nutty Az in the end. That was his name, Nutty Az. And this guy, he was a chef, maybe he still is, and used to work in hotels, quite good hotels, I think, London hotels or whatever. But as a result, he'd turn up to the lake at very antisocial hours. You know, he'd have to work an evening shift in a restaurant somewhere, and he might not get down the lake till 2 o'clock in the morning. Any time from midnight till first light. Nutty Az could just stroll down the bank. Now, Fat Sam was a strange dog. She had her little quirks. She had people that she loved, and she had people that she really didn't like. And for no reason, it was something in her head. She hated barmen. If someone came to collect glasses off your table, she'd go for them if she was under the table. She couldn't stand people taking glasses off my beer table. She got me banned from a couple of pubs through that. She didn't like people with crash helmets. She didn't even like motorbikes if she could hear a motorbike coming. My sister that I lived with when I was younger, when I first got Sam, her boyfriend had a motorbike, and she used to hear him coming about 5 miles away and start growling, ready to have a go when he came in the door. But more than that, she'd pick individual characters that she didn't particularly like. And they could be the nicest people in the world, like Nutty Az. I mean, Nutty Az was great. He was great with people, he was great with animals. She should have loved him. He was the chef. He used to come down stinking of meat, and usually he's got a bag in his hand and he'd have steaks in there, or duck breasts, all these beautiful cuts from the restaurant that had been left that he'd oiked, and he'd come down and we'd put them on the barbecue. So she should have loved him. But I'm not sure it wasn't even more of a game for her. What would happen is I'd go to bed, she'd go to bed, she had her own little bone print bed in the bivvy. She just used to wait for me to fall asleep, a bit like Maddie does now. Wait for me to fall asleep and then sneak out and sleep in the bushes. And if I woke up, I used to drag her back in her bed, and then she'd sneak out and sleep in the bushes. But she used to actively wait for Nutty Az to turn up. She'd hide in the bushes, and if it was a night when he was coming down, maybe a Friday night or whatever, he'd turn up, and he told me what he used to do is he got close enough down the lane that he could see the car park. He'd turn his engine off, knock it out of gear, and just coast as quietly as was possible into the car park, get his gear out, not make a sound, load himself up with what he needed, just until light, just like a bed chair and a couple of rods or whatever. And he'd sneak along the path. Bear in mind, he doesn't know which swim I'm in, or where I'm fishing, but he'd just sneak everywhere because he knew that Sam would be laying in wait, and he'd sneak along. He wouldn't make a sound, and as soon as he'd get behind my bivvy, it's not like she'd growl and let him know. She'd wait until she could see the whites of his eyes, and then she'd just come flying out of the bushes and go, and just go mad at him. I mean, she never bit him or anything. I think it was just a game. But he used to jump out of his skin. It used to scare him shitless. It was actually quite amusing. It did used to make me laugh. But yeah, Sam was a very strange hound. She had odd eating habits. I think I said the other day, actually, when I was talking about it, she loved to eat soap, and she loved to eat poo. Horse poo, cow poo was her favourite. When I first got her, when she was this little puppy, it was, back in the days, there was no close season. It wasn't at this time, but it was way back. And I'd first got her, and long story short, I'd found a lake down in Devon or somewhere that was open. I think Devon had an open close season, if that makes sense. It didn't have a close season. And I'd gone down with my girlfriend at the time, and Fat Sam. We'd driven all the way down to Devon, just on a whim. I thought, I'm going fishing, I need to go fishing. Driven down there, set up the tent in a field next to this poxy little duck pond. Gone to sleep. And I'm in my mummy style bag, and girlfriend's on the floor in another sleeping bag. Just on a bedroll on the floor of this tent. Sam's just in the tent. Woke up in the morning, Sam's not in the tent. Gone back to sleep for a bit, and then I woke up to the most god-awful smell, and this weird, I had the big long hair then. I woke up, Sam used to have this thing, she'd come up to me in bed if she wanted me to wake up, and she'd lick my face. Now this particular day, she'd been out, she'd snuck out of the tent, she'd gone into this cow's field, and she'd eaten loads of cow shit. And I was woken up by her standing with her front paws on my long hair, pinning it to the floor, her back legs straddled over me, licking and licking and licking my face, and I opened my eyes to this smell, and she had green cow dung hanging off of her beard, and it was all over me. My arms was in the bag, I couldn't get them out, the hair was pinned to the floor, and all I could do was thrash about like that, screaming at her to get off, and I was just covered in this cow stuff. Yeah, she was an absolutely hideous dog, but I'm sure that story was going somewhere. Oh, it was. One particular day down on I think I was on the Oaks Bank, and Pit 3 was right behind us, and some of the Savay lot were fishing pit 3 off rota, because Save had a week on, week off rota. Now, a lot of the guys, Steve Alcott, Phil Harper, a lot of them, if it was their off week, they'd still want to go fishing. They'd still want to come up to the valley and go to the Horse and Barge and go to Sabu's and go to the club and, you know, do the do. So they got tickets for pit 3. She had some nice fish in there, wasn't overly fished. It was perfect for them. They could hide away off rota up there. Now, it was the end of my session. I'd been there a couple of days, and I was packing up to go home. Sam was just running about in the bushes or whatever. She's come trotting out. I've loaded up, called her down, loaded up the motor. She's jumped in beside me. I can't remember what motor I had at that sort of time. I think I'd got an old Datsun van or Nissan sort of van thing. Right, shitty old. I used to get through motors one every couple of months. Anyway, I've got in the van. She's sitting in, say, 2-seater, so she's sitting in the passenger seat. And we've left there and we've driven off down the road. We got round the corner, and I can smell this smell. And I'm thinking, my God, what is that stink? Anyway, we got a bit further down the road, and I'm thinking, Jesus, that proper smells. It smells like shit. So I'm looking at my shoes, checking my shoes. I've got, you know, it's not there. I'm looking around, and it's getting stronger and stronger, this smell. So I've looked round, and I've looked at her, and she's sat there, and she's actually got poo across her teeth and coming out from under her gums. And it was obviously human poo. And she'd been over pit 3, so I sussed out later. Someone had pooed in the bushes, and she'd ate it. In fact, I know whose it was, but I'm not going to say their name on here. I found out later, somebody told me, they couldn't believe it. They thought it was hilarious. So I've noticed she's got all this poo hanging out of her mouth, and I've just thought, oh my God, you disgusting creature. So I've then clocked that I've just driven past a lake, and there's like a gravel car park there, and I've scooted into this lake. I've dragged the dog, I've pulled her out, stuck her head straight in the pond, and got a handful of gravel and scraped all her teeth off and washed all her mouth out. And I was just like, you disgusting, horrible animal. Pulled her back, kicked her up the bum, chucked her back in the passenger seat and driven off. And it's just, that was Sam all over. That was what she was like. She just loved to eat the most disgusting things she could possibly find. But she did also like vindaloos. She was mad for a vindaloo. And we used to eat a lot of curry on bit 4 at the time. I said about the other day about Sabu's. I used to do, I think they did delivery actually to the gate at the end of the lane. So rather than go to the Indian, if we were having a night round the lake, barbecue, a few beers and that, quite often we'd order a Sabu's, and it'd turn up and he'd phone up and he'd be up the end, and we'd drive up the lane, someone would go up there and collect the Indian. And you'd always order too much, wouldn't you? And when you order the hottest stuff you can get because you're showing off, I can eat a fowl, I can eat a vindaloo or whatever, all get left on the floor. In the morning there'd be nothing left. Fat Sam would have the lot. She could eat as hot as hotter than I could eat. She could eat absolutely anything, and she did anything and everything. So anyway, I suppose with there's an awful lot of stories about drinking and poo and stuff. Better put some fishing ones in here as well, wouldn't I? Smoking again. Look, my mate Phil told me, Jacko, chatting to him yesterday, and he said it's considered unprofessional to drink and smoke on camera. But I did explain to him that in this little part of the world at the moment, we're only up to 1988, so I can do as I please. The fishing on pit 4, although, like I said, we had the crack, and it might sound like we were just there for a party. That wasn't the case at all. I've always been very, very, I wouldn't say competitive with fishing. I don't know what it is. I was talking to Mark Wilcox yesterday, and I'm sure he'll be watching this, and he won't mind me saying that he is very similar to me. Fishing is your own pursuit, you know. You're fanatical about it, you live for it, you know, you dream about it, you live and breathe it. But it's not a competitive sport, but it's very easy to become competitive. And Mark, very much like me, probably wanted to catch the most. the way I look at it is, if you don't catch the most, if somebody on a lake catches more in a year than you do, I mean, fair play to them. But if they do, that means you could have done better. That's the way I look at it. I think, you know, if I've caught 15 fish in a year and Mark caught 20, then he's caught 5 more than me. He's fished better than I have. I'm not jealous of what he's caught. I'm upset with myself that I didn't fish. Something was missing in my fishing because I didn't catch more than everybody else. So other people were doing it better than I was. That's the competitive element, and it's healthy to have that little thing. And I'm sure me and Mark did have it. He used to mention quite often how many. I think he wanted to catch 10 20s in a year from there, which was quite a feat, and I obviously did as well. So yeah, we did fish hard. Apart from, you know, when we were having a social, we did fish hard and long, and I caught quite a few, you know, fairly nice fish along the way. I still wasn't getting these bigger 20s or Rob's 30, you know, the Holy Grail. But I was getting sort of mid-20s, and I was getting them quite regular. I was doing well out the builder's yard. I did like that swim. I had quite a few out there. I was doing well off the point, and I'd started fishing a third rod, a stroke rod, just round under the end of the point, and I'm talking about right underneath my feet at night. You only got a bite there at night. It was a really weird cast. There was a bush that hung over, and you wanted to sort of be on the back of it, and it was almost an impossible cast. You couldn't flick under it because the bush actually went into the water. So you used to have to go down the front. There was a little stump at the front. You used to have to stand on this stump and let out about 15 foot or more of line, more than you could easily deal with, and sort of get it penduluming, sort of swinging in and out like so, until you got the momentum, and then you had to whisk the rod right round to the left, and the lead would go around on a great big arc, so the line would almost go in the bushes. And the second the lead hit the water, you have to open the bow arm and push the rod tip straight under, so that you didn't end up in the branches, and then you'd pull the rod tip under and trap the line again. So what you were doing in effect was casting circular round the tree, dropping it in the water, and then letting it swing right underneath to the very base of the point. So where my rods were set up, I was fishing almost underneath them, if you like, down there. And I had a few bites doing that, always in the middle of the night. Never the bigger ones, it seemed to be the smaller ones. In the end, I cut a little slot in the end of the point for one rod. I actually got collared on that. That was one of the few times we'd ever seen a bailiff up there. One day a bailiff turned up from nowhere and caught me with this rod in this little hole there, and then went round to Mark's swim, and I think he caught him with a stroke rod in the bushes. And then he went round to Lyndon's swim, and Lyndon had 3 rods set up, bold as you like, right in front of him. And he'd had enough by now, and he banned Lyndon. But me and Mark got away with it, which was a bit of a touch. So, morph moment there. If we've dropped a little bit darker, it's because that spotlight's just run out of battery. I have noticed when I've been editing these that because of this window, there's a little quarter light window there. I'll show you it. Where are we? There. We're running? Yeah. This little window, you can probably just about see I've actually tacked one of the pillowcases out the airing code up there, but the missus don't know that, to try and diffuse the light a little bit. But what's happening, I noticed in a few of the videos, it's dropping in light, and let's just turn this off. Yeah, it's dropping in light levels, and that's when a cloud goes over the sun, because there's a lot of light coming in there. Normally, I'd have a cameraman. Look at me, I'd have a cameraman. But normally, if I was doing a longer blog type, you know, all my stuff on the bank I do myself. But if I was doing anything for YouTube or whatever, normally I'd have somebody on the camera, and they'd see the light level drop and twiddle the buttons or whatever they do. But I ain't got that. It's only me, as you've seen me and the flies, and unless I can train the flies to do it, I don't think it's happening, is it? So just, you know, you just have to put up with that if the light bounces up and down. But like I say, it's probably dropped now because that spotlight's just gone out. You wouldn't think you'd need them up here, but I've got one there and one there, otherwise it's just all shadows behind me. Anyway, where was I? I was talking about fishing, wasn't I? I wasn't going to talk about everything else. So yeah, throughout the summer, I can't remember how many fish we had, but we had a lovely time up there. Really enjoyed it. And then it got to my favourite time of year, which is always sort of September onwards. I mean, that is the prime time. Nowadays it seems to be more October's, when it cools down and that. But back in those days, I always remember, the middle of September onwards. That was the prime time. And Pitford was no different. I'd found. I'd come away from the point area, I'd moved down. I'd seen a lot of fish out from when I was in the point, standing in the back point behind. I'd see them out in the middle out there. It wasn't far out. It was very hard to fish from the back point because there was a big circular bar that went round, and anything over quite a short distance you had to fish over this bar, and it was all a bit dodgy. But you could get it from the swims along the canal bank. There were some beautiful swims set along that canal bank. And I found one, I can't actually remember the name of it. It was about 4, there was a big one in the middle which might have been called the double or something, I'm not sure. And it was the next one up. I nearly had a flicker memory then. It's sort of, when something you're searching for pings across the periphery. But it got away. What was that swim called? I don't know. Anyway, it hardly matters. This next swim up from the double swim, again, wasn't a very popular swim. It had some savage lumps and bumps out there. But I used to see fish show there quite regular. And I decided I was going to sort of experiment up there, sort of investigate, if you like, throughout the autumn months. So I sort of set my stall up there. I used to go up there and I started baiting up. I had a good old plumb round. I just started using these ball heads, and that was all down to Steve Alcott. I'm sure most of you know Steve Alcott, but if not, he was one of the Save guys. He was a friend then, he's still a friend now. He's a lovely bloke. God, he's caught some fish. When people put claims to people, I get people say it about me, the first bloke to have this amount of that and that amount of that. I think you don't know people like Steve. I know a lot of anglers who stay below the radar. You've got Johnny Holtz and Steve Alcotts and all that. They've caught everything that's out there that you want to catch, they've already caught it. Very, very good angler. And he was showing me one day these ball leads that he was using on Pit 3 and on Save. They were 5.5 ounces. Now we use leads. I use 6 ounce leads from a boat, sometimes 8 if I'm going out there. Casting, I use 4.5s. It's not as obscene as it was back then. A 5.5 ounce lead, round ball lead with a swivel in the top, unheard of. But they were using them as bolt rigs. And he said, "Do you want to give it a go?" Short. It was when that Kriston multi-strand first came out. So it was a little short braided piece of braid, but it was made of about 50 or 60 tiny little strands. It was parachute cord or something similar to that. And we were using a hook called a Marutu Kinrui, I think it was. It had like a square bend, Japanese spade end hooks you had to whip on. Very, very sharp, very, very good hooks. And they came in all the odd sizes, 7s and 5s and whatever. So I thought I'd give it a go. But what I found out straight away, regardless of how the ball lead made your rig work, was the way they used to feel the bottom. I mean, I wasn't brave enough to use the 5.5, so I don't think my rods would have cast a 5.5. I managed to get some 3.5s, which was still huge. But the feel of the bottom was completely different. A normal sort of, normal casting lead, or pear lead or whatever, zip lead, sort of skips along the bottom. But these ball leads really dig into everything. You can feel every lump of gravel. But what also I could feel were the sandy patches. So rather than fishing like in the silt or on the gravel bar, I was finding the bit at the bottom of every bar, there's a bit where the stones have tumbled off. It's still nearly bar, it's not quite silty gully, and it's usually sand, and they're amazing feeding spots. They really are. If you can find that bit, the base of the bar before the stones, and before the silt, in between the two, that's usually the feeding area. They love that little strip along the bottom. And from this swim, the name will come back to me at some stage, just like that. From this swim, that's exactly what I found. I found this really savage bar, and down the back of it and off the right-hand side, I believe, I found these two beautiful little sandy strips and started putting my garlic and whatever it was, homemade fish meal baits out there with a throwing stick, pumping a bit in. Even if I fished a different swim, I was putting a little bit on these two spots. Come about, I don't know, it must have been end of September, I started catching a few fish from here. And the one thing that was noticeable straight away is that they were completely different stamp. These were the fish we'd seen in the back bay back then. These were beautiful fish, sort of 26s, 27s, maybe even 28s. I remember the first one I had from there, it was jet black. Oh, it was a stunning creature. It was like first light, like just, it was all misty on the water then, sort of autumnal mornings. I remember being laid there under the brolly looking out. I took a photo of the rods actually. Put the camera away, laid there, just thinking this is heaven, absolute heaven this is. I think I'd heard a couple of fish out there in the night, and all the lines sort of hung with dew, you know, get them water droplets on there, and then I just heard beep, and looked round, and the tip just sort of shook a little bit, and all the water fell off of the line, so you get loads of little ripples on the calm surface going out to where the line went in the water. And I just thought, yeah, you going? And I was sort of struggling out of the bed, and I got halfway out, and the tip went over, and it's screaming off, and I hooked this fish, got him away from the bar, as I remember, it was quite deep, close in there, and I got him in close, and he's chugging up and down, and I was sort of thinking, this is a bit of a different animal. He's really putting up a good scrap here. It's probably on the old Cardinal 55, so you can just imagine that clutch, you know, that amazing little sound. Can we get that going there? Getting that, you know, as he's screaming up and down the margins. Got him, he's come up, swirled in front, black as you're out it was, went in the net, and I think that one was 27, 28, something like 27 I think that one was, which was probably my biggest fish from there at that time. And he was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And then I was addicted to that swim. I fished that swim quite a lot, and did pick up some of the better sort of mid-20s from there. Still no sign of Rob's 30 or the mythical grey scar or this other slightly top end fish that one of Mark's mates had earlier in the year. But yeah, I was doing well from that swim, and I did really enjoy it in there. But it didn't last very long. You know, the sort of autumn catching thing on there, I remember it died off quite quick. You know, the first couple of frosts, and I don't think anyone was catching. Most of the anglers sort of drifted away. The social scene, obviously there's not enough people there, so you know, if there was another 2 people there, you'd have a bonfire or something. But in general, I think it petered off, and I think we sort of decided, we'd already decided we were rejoining. There was no doubt about this at all, you know. So I think we decided to fish local. We had a lake in Crawley called Tilgate, and we were going to do the winter on there. But I think the last thing we did on our last session at Pit 4, that autumn, early that winter, was drive straight to Hillingdon, council offices on the way back, put the forms in. We were definitely having tickets for the following season. You know, I wanted to catch that Rob's 30, I really did. Just actually one last thing today, thinking about that last journey back from Hillingdon Council, I'm pretty sure it was that day. If you are one of these people that's read everything I've ever written, and you're watching these and you think, hold on Laney, last time you said this happened there, or that was that year, or this was on that lake, then forgive me, because there's a lot of memories and they all get very, very jumbled up, but I'm fairly sure that this was on that particular day. I think I alluded to it just now. I had an old Datsun van. They were 2 a penny in Crawley for some reason, Datsuns. The Datsuns were, I don't know if they're now all called Nissans, but Datsun, Nissan, same company. Whether it was a van or I think it was a hatchback, you know, sort of one of these tiny little estate things. Now, back in those times, I would like to say I was quite a capable mechanic. But then I'm going to tell you this story, so any mechanics listening will say, really? That's what you call mechanics? So I won't say that. I'll say I was willing to give anything a go. And I've always said this to anyone. I say it to the missus about cooking. I say, anyone can do anything if you can read. Yeah, if you can get a manual, whether it be cooking, cars, building a studio, whatever. If you can get something that tells you how to do it and you can read and you follow that instruction, if that instruction's been written correctly, then you're going to end up with the result that you wanted at the end, surely. So I've always thought like this and thought it's worth a go, you know, bodge it, it's worth a go. So I used to, if anything went wrong with my motors, which was regular, I wasn't adverse to having a go. Used to go to the library. Remember libraries back in the day? Used to go to the library and get a Haynes manual. Now, that was, you know, every car had a Haynes manual, and some bloke, Mr. Haynes, had obviously stripped down every car that had ever been built, photographed every stage of the operation, and written a manual about it. So I've got the Haynes manual for this particular Datsun van thing that I've got, because it was making a hell of a noise. There was oil in the water, so I knew the head gasket had gone. You know, I knew enough about engines to know, I'd done enough head gaskets to know when the head gasket had gone. I used to just take the heads off of most of them, get a cornflake packet, a cardboard packet, lay it on there, trace round it, cut out a gasket, stick it on the top. You used to buy this red gasket seal stuff, red or blue it was. You'd get either, squirt a load of that on, bolt it down, and that usually did the trick. But this wasn't happening with this Datsun van. It was still misbehaving, so they had aluminium heads, so I assumed I'd warp the head. So anyway, I've got the Haynes manual, I've stripped it all down, and I've read a way of testing the head. I think you put it on a sheet of glass, and to see if it was flush or if it wobbled at all or whatever, something, I can't remember, but I did something, realised I needed a new head for this engine. For those that know nothing about engines, that's the big bit on the top of the engine where your valves go up and down. So anyway, I've gone down to Breakers, I said I've got this motor this year, blah blah blah, bought a new head, whatever it was, 20 quid, 30 quid, whatever, got it back, and I'd laid all the bits of the car out down the pavement with bits of masking tape around them with number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 all the way down. So all I had to do was go back to the start of the manual and look at the numbered bit and put it all back exactly the same way in reverse order to what I'd done, which is exactly what I'd done. The worst thing is there's a timing chain, everything's got to be set up exactly right with dots, and yeah, but I'd read all this and I'd done it, and got in there after a day or whatever, put the key in, turned the key, and it started. I'm like, oh my God, you know, I'm a mechanic. It started, but the noise was unbelievable. So I popped the bonnet and I've had a look, and it's like it's got no exhaust. So I've checked all the exhaust bolts, the manifold and everything, and it's all perfect. It's all bolted together as it should be. And then I noticed there's another hole on the back of the head. There's all these where pipes and tubes and bits go. There was a hole, and there was a pipe for everything. But mine had an extra one, and I looked at the old head and that didn't have it, so I'd bought the wrong model. And what it was basically was a hole into the top of the engine, and it was about the thickness of your little finger. And it had 2 studs there for attaching something to, but I had nothing to attach to it. So I've looked at it and I thought, right, think about this, Laney. I'm not taking all that off and doing it all again. I'm so close to a result here. I must be able to block it off. So I looked at the hole and thought, I don't know, what can I do? What can I get? And I've tried a few bits and pieces in there, nothing fitted. Then I had a stroke of genius. I went into my fishing gear and I got a 1 ounce Arsley lead, which is just a lead weight, you know, normal, like pear lead, 1 ounce. It was just about the right, just a bit too big. So I pushed it in there as hard as as far as I could get it. I got a little bit of steel rod and I got a lump hammer, and I've just put it up against it, and I've just lumped this straight into this cavity going into the engine, into this hole, and it's sort of spread right out, and it's made the perfect seal, because lead's obviously soft. It's gone in now. Turned the key afterwards, sweet as a nut. I just thought, oh, this is absolutely perfect, you know. So it was ideal, and it got me to the lake. No disasters, but I'm pretty sure it was on the way back from Hillingdon. It must have been warmer on the way home or whatever. I hadn't thought it through totally. The engine got hot as we nearly got home. Lead's got a very low melting temperature. So we were coming down the M25, probably going way too fast. Engine's got hot. The lead weight's melted, fallen out the hole. All the oil, water and everything else has come thundering out. Suddenly there's this massive burst of exhaust noise from under the engine, followed by a huge great big bang. I had Keith with me at the time. We coasted to the side of the road, popped the bonnet, and there was a hole like that in the side of the engine. I think the piston had come right through the side or something. So that was the end of the Datsun van. It was also the end of our year's fishing on Pit 4, but we were going to be back, new van, new season. We were bang up for it.